everyone. Welcome back to another segment of AWS On Air. We are here live in Las Vegas, Nevada at reInvent 2022. I'm one of your co-hosts, Jeff Marushak. I'm a senior solutions architect on our DoD Air Force team. And with me is Chad. Chad, how's it going, man?
Man, it's going great.
All right.
I love reInvent.
How bad do your feet hurt right now?
I'm doing okay today.
Your voice is sounding a little
My voice
sus.
is starting to go, though. Yeah, my voice is definitely sus for sure. My name is Chad Lacey. I'm a global sales strategist with AWS, and I'm happy to introduce my friend Raj from the Athena team. Raj, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Jeff. Hi, everyone. My name is Raj Devnath. I'm a senior product manager in the Amazon Athena team. I've been with Amazon for around 3.5 years now.
Awesome. So Athena, we know Athena means SQL into S3. What are we talking about today, the new feature of Athena?
So we are talking about a new feature of Amazon Athena, Amazon Athena for Apache Spark. And what it does is expands Athena functionality so that we now support Apache Spark workloads in addition to SQL. So we're going to support Apache Spark over Python. So what we saw as like, a lot of our customers love SQL. I think that's kind of where Athena started, right? So a lot of people send a lot of data into SQL. But what happens is that SQL is great when you want to query, extract, join the data. So a lot of people love it. It's simple, it's easy to get started. But when you start to think of more complex use cases like time series data, insights like regressions, forecasting, machine learning, you want a little bit more than what SQL can do. You need to have a little bit more expressiveness. And what we're seeing is people start to want to use languages like Python. And they want to start to use frameworks like Apache Spark. Now, the reason being that it gives you the ability to run cloud scale. Right? And that's kind of what we saw is that's kind of, we're hitting a wall with that. And now we want to kind of support Apache Spark so people can use the big data frameworks, but still get the ease of use and convenience that you get with Athena.
And we've been talking for several years right now. AWS is creating purpose-built databases. So you have a database for the right use. Sounds like you're also starting to move into purpose-built analytics, so you can do analytics for the right.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think our intent is to say that we have ability to support a wide variety of different analytics engine. That's why we started with, hey, we can do SQL, and then we're looking at Presto, Trino kind of support. And now we are kind of moving into Apache Spark and saying, Apache Spark is kind of, we look at it as an ingredient technology, as a big data framework, and we want to bring it to several use cases. And one of the key use cases that we want to bring it to is Amazon Athena, because we expect that business analysts, data analysts love to come to Amazon Athena. We've got thousands, tens of thousands of customers using it today, and their main users, it's serverless, which means you don't have to provision hardware. It's fully managed, which means you don't have to worry about doing settings. So it's got this great ease of use, and kind of bringing Apache Spark as another engine into that means that now we have expanded the ease of use capabilities to support multiple languages and multiple engines.
And ultimately, just giving customers the options to do work the way they want to do it, right? In maybe a framework that they're most comfortable with.
Absolutely. I think this is all about choice. It's all about saying, hey, you can do a lot more. And I think just saying that now by expanding from SQL to Python, it just allows you to do that more. That's extra step now.
Yeah, so you said that there was a use case to use Athena with Spark, but can you give some use cases of when you would use that pair together?
I think a great one is basically when you start to think of time series analysis or time series forecasting, right? So when you start to look at things like that, you need to have expressivity in language. You need to have functions. You want to have loops, right? So you can do that in SQL, but it becomes pretty long. I mean, I know customers who've written 3,000-line SQL statements, right? I mean, that gets challenging. And the other
usually select star works for me.
It does. I mean, that's a great place to start, right? And I think that's why people love it. But then you start to say, okay, now I want to write a loop. SQL lets you write a loop. It's surprising, but it does. But then your statements start to get extremely long. And the other big challenge is you want to use ecosystem of libraries, right? So SQL doesn't have a package manager. Python has PIP. It has a bunch of package manager, which means you can bring in packages, and Python has like 300,000 libraries, right? So you can easily say, I want to do this function, I've got a library to do that, and I can get started and get running very quickly. In SQL, you literally have to roll your own, which becomes a lot more challenging for customers. So the use cases that I mentioned, where you're going to do a lot more complex analysis with loops, functions, classes, that gets challenging to do with SQL.
Yeah.
So what would be the steps for somebody to get started doing this, using Apache Spark and Athena?
Absolutely. So I think what we do is on the Amazon Athena console, we provide a simplified notebook experience. So
Okay.
what we have seen is people who use Python typically like to use notebooks as the user interface. And because the simple reason being, it's a single place you can come in, you can enter your calculations, you can execute your calculations, you can visualize data, and once you've done all of that, you can even share it within your organization, right? So you can do all of that. So notebooks are great. So we provide kind of a simplified notebook interface on the Athena console so that you can take that and get started. We also have a bunch of customers who have their own front end, their own business application, and they can use the Athena APIs to interface to the data, process the data, and pull the data back to their business application. So both of those work very well.
Well, this sounds great. Do you have a demo? Can we see this in action?
Well, absolutely. I think, let me get my... So is my computer?
There we go.
Yep.
Okay, there we go.
So it looks like
here
we're
you
at
go.
the
This is
management
the
console here.
Amazon Management Console.
Yeah.
So this is the Athena web page.
I've been here a few times.
Yeah.
And
Looks like it's connecting.
The demo gods have woken up.
I think we're going to give them maybe a minute to kind of...
Well, it looks like Wi-Fi. You're not connected. I see up there.
No, it's on wired, but...
Oh, yeah.
Oh, it did work.
Here we go.
It just took a little bit. So you can come and you can see this is the standard Athena console that you would run into. So you have an ability to analyze your data if you want to. That's the way to start. And typically it takes you to create a new work group. So work group is kind of a resource that we use to separate users and teams that share the same AWS account. If you have two different teams and you want to kind of separate applications between the two so one team can't see what the next team is doing, or you want to control access to resources like database and tables, you create work groups, and then you create policies within that so that that work group alone can access certain resources.
Yeah.
Right? So you can start with saying, hey, here's my getting started work group. Description is optional. You pick Apache Spark as the engine.
Yep.
You have an ability to turn on an example
And
notebook.
that's new. That's never been there before. It's always just assumed that you're using SQL.
Yeah, exactly. So previously it just had the SQL before. Now you see an extra box saying use Spark. And then we have the ability to turn on an example notebook. So it's great for you to come in and try the functionality out on the console.
Nice.
The next part of it, there's a bunch of additional configurations, but we realized that not everybody wants to go in all of the details. So you can either click use defaults, in which case it'll set it all up for you, so you just have to use that. Alternately, if you want to, you can go into each of these and start setting up. Well, I don't know what happened there. We got a little bit of a connection issue, so let's go back to
This click.
I think we're having a little bit of connectivity challenges. So, yeah, but I was saying you can either use defaults or you can go in each of these. So I think here we just click on use defaults.
Yeah.
So effectively, the whole process is simplified for you, and you just create.
So it looks like that's setting up a role and a default S3 bucket for the results.
It sets up actually multiple things. Actually, that's a great. So let me go into that and kind of show you inside a work group what else. So it kind of sets up an IAM role for you,
Okay.
so that it has the right permissions. It sets up a working directory, so that you basically in S3 you have a bucket where if you have any results and all of that you want to send to, you got that available. It also sets up the content encryption. So if you want to, you can turn on encryption for your notebooks as well as for your working directory.
Okay.
The default is basically the notebooks are encrypted. We use the AWS managed Athena key. But we also give customers an ability to come in with their own KMS key. So we do have a lot of customers who are very careful about how they actually keep the data. So you have the ability to turn on encryption for your results as well as for your notebook.
Different customers have different requirements around encryption, so it's always good to give them the tools to do what they need to do.
Absolutely.
The audience next to us applauded that, by the way. They like that a lot.
Awesome. That's great.
I
Right?
love it.
And I think this was actually a big challenge because previously the experience was you had to go to IAM console and create the role. You had to go to a S3 console and create the role. You had to go to KMS and all of this. So what we found out, feedback from our customers, I don't want to go into all of these consoles. Can you simplify this? And I think that's kind of the result of us getting feedback from our customers on that. Once you do that, you can do two things. One is you see there's an example notebook already available for you. So typically you can just click on that, in which case it would go ahead, and we have a notebook explorer. So here is the editor experience. So you can see that we went in and we have our example notebook ready to go. So you have actually now your Spark session up and running. Right. So it was pretty instantaneous for you to get started. And this is literally, we can see that there's a data set sitting in Amazon S3. So we can just say run, and your Spark application just started within less than a second and it's good to go. You can see that you got a session, it's now actually running. So the whole thing is, I had data, I didn't have to do any amount of work to pre-prepare it, pre-process it, figure out everything. It figures out what the schema is, it creates all of that on the fly, and it actually, you got the whole Parquet file now processed and ready to go. So you're just like instantaneous, right? So now I can, for example, say, show me some data in that, right? And again, it's instantaneous. It started instantaneously. It's now running. You can see a progress bar showing how you're actually doing progress on it.
Yeah.
And
Well, I've heard that question a lot. We have Parquet files. Can we utilize that in this tool and that tool? So this is great to see a Parquet file being
so we support
processed.
a lot of open data formats right out of the box, but the common ones being CSV, Parquet, JSON. Typically, we recommend Parquet. It's a columnar format because it's great for big data processing, because especially when you're selecting specific columns, it's incredibly faster. So we typically recommend customers to use that basically to increase the speed of processing. But the expectation is we do support a lot of the open data formats right out of the box.
Nice.
And I think kind of just going through some of the fun things, you can actually do some nice formatting with it. I'll also show you kind of a couple of other, sorry. I think it's just the network is taking a little bit longer. So you can actually print it out in a nice format, so you got a little bit of a pretty print of a table.
Yeah.
The other big thing is basically SQL. So it's not only that you can do Python statements, but you can also do Spark SQL. So if you were a SQL user, you just write spark.sql and you write the whole SQL command. So here is your typical select statement that you talked about. So you got to select and you pick something. So this is great. So if you are an analyst who's just used to writing Spark statements, you can continue, used to writing SQL statements, you can just come ahead and continue to write SQL statement. All that you're doing is writing it in a spark.sql construct. But you still get all of the data that you used to, you're seeing the output come out of it. And this is like a 20 terabyte file that it processed and got the data for you. So it's actually it really feels like you're sitting at your desktop and looking at maybe a 10 megabyte file, and it's actually running over a cluster over like a 30 terabyte file. I think that's the power of it. That's the interactivity, the speed that you're getting.
Yeah.
But you're actually now running it on a big data framework.
Right. And so we're able to query from various sources.
Absolutely.
Using the notebooks, we can check the execution status, we can review the logs, we can review the execution history.
Absolutely. And I think let me also show you, I think there's also the plot, and I'm hoping that this one, I didn't run through all of the different commands, so I'm just jumping around a little bit, so I'm just hoping that it does it correctly.
I see we've almost made it to the end of the
I saw
demo.
that.
Yeah,
I love that.
Yeah. So here you can see an example of a bar chart, right?
We see some visualization here.
Yeah, absolutely. So you can create your own dashboards, right? So
Yeah.
it's not like now I have to go to a different tool, open up a different console. Right here, I'm plotting data. I'm using data. I'm doing all of this right here. So it's just a single place where you just unleash the power of Notebook right there.
Right, yeah.
And we did talk about sessions. So you can always... So till now, if you see, there was no mention of Spark.
Right.
Right? You're using Python, but it's like Spark behind. So if you really want to get into okay, now let me see the details. I want to see some more details of Spark or the session itself. You can see the session details, what are the session ID, what are the engine used, all the different calculations that I ran as part of that. And you can go inside the calculation itself and see what are the
That's
code that
awesome.
you ran, what are the results that came out of it. So the idea is you get a lot of the detail,
Yeah.
but you can just be at the notebook and just look at, I'm just running Python code, I don't need to worry about Spark. You just have minimal Spark expertise and you have a great interactive experience.
That's
Yeah.
fantastic.
So we saw some of we saw the demo and we saw some of the behind the scenes, like the calculation details. How does pricing work for this new feature?
So similar to Athena today, it's basically you pay for what you use, right? So today, Athena uses $1 per terabyte model, and we kind of switched up to a bit. So we are going to be actually charging customers based on the amount of compute they use and the duration of the compute. So we charge 35 cents per DPU hour, and DPU is a unit of compute. It stands for 4 vCPUs and 16 gigabytes of memory. That's what you get. And the reason being that a lot of customers have told us that basically how they cross Spark workloads is a bit different because you're doing data fetching and a lot of local processing.
Yeah.
So it makes sense for a lot of customers that they pay based on compute. So this was kind of, again, based on a customer feedback that now we moved to a compute-based pricing, and this was actually welcomed by a lot of customers because now they know, hey, I'm going to be able to run compute, and I'm going to get charged for compute, so the pricing is a lot more intuitive to me.
Yeah. Well, and I see on the screen there, I see a default executor size, which is 1 DPU, and a max executor size. So is there some elasticity built in here?
Absolutely. So I think when you set up a session, I'm thinking we'll go back to the details. So when you do a session, you can actually set up session details. So
Okay.
by default, you get up to 20 DPUs, which means that typically when you run a Spark application, it has multiple stages. You may have a query stage, a join stage, you may have multiple stages. And each of them may require a different amount of compute.
Right.
And so you usually want to have some cost control, so you set a ceiling saying, I want up to 20 DPUs, right? So that's what that limit says. So a single application doesn't overwhelm and take over all the resources. So it allows you to set that for each notebook, for each session. So you can do that. And the other thing you can actually set is the amount of idle timeout. So some people may want an aggressive timeout. If I'm not doing anything with it, immediately shut everything down. Others might be, hey, I want to go for lunch break and I want to come back and I want to still see that notebook where it is, right? I don't want to lose my work. So, so it's kind of, we give the control again to a customer to say, you got the idle time on, you want to set it to 20 minutes, you can. You want to set it to 1 hour, you can. Just don't set it to 2 days. It will not let you do that. But it's within reason that you have an interactive session where you're working on the data, you want to be able to step out, come back to it, and still continue where you left off.
Yeah.
Great. Well, we're low on time, so I wanted to thank you for being here, Raj. Chad, thanks for joining me on stage. To learn more about Spark with Athena. And to our viewers, stay tuned. We're going to take a little break. Back in a few more minutes with the next segment.